It is midnight in Washington, 6 in London, and 2 on a Monday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Conn-young. Let's get a check of the main stories we're following up this hour. President Park Geun-hye is meeting with foreign affairs and security officials at the nation's top office as we speak to discuss the possible instability in North Korea following the execution of the second most powerful man in that state. Now this, following her earlier remarks that reckless provocations by Pyongyang should not be ruled out. As Kim Jong-un moves to cement his power and as North Korea commemorates the second anniversary of former leader Kim Jong-il's death, analysts are keeping a close eye on the new landscape of power under the new young leader. And Seoul Metro says it will join the ongoing strike by Korean railway workers starting this Wednesday. And with Seoul Subway Line 3 running at just 85% of its normal capacity, that's expected to cause further disruptions in train and subway services. Now we'll have those stories and more, but first let us begin this Monday afternoon at the nation's top office where President Park Geun-hye has just convened a meeting of the nation's foreign affairs and security ministers to discuss the situation in North Korea. Now South Korea is keeping a close watch on the North based on an understanding that Chang Song-taek's execution suggests that Kim Jong-un regime is not as stable as previously thought, and that Pyongyang could possibly launch a provocation to turn people's attention away from its internal issues. Now, those attending this afternoon's meeting include President Park's top security advisor Kim Jang-soo, the country's defense and foreign affairs and unification ministers, as well as the chief of a spy agency. Meanwhile, earlier in the day, President Park Geun-hye said that given the current political situation in North Korea, the South Korean government cannot rule out the possibility of a reckless provocation by Pyongyang. The recent execution of Chang Song-taek, who was regarded as the second most powerful figure in North Korea, has raised many questions about Pyongyang's next move. Well, during a meeting with her top secretaries earlier this Monday morning, the president urged the public and private sectors and the military to stay prepared for any kind of contingencies.
북한에서 전개되고 있는 일련의 사태를 보면 향후 북한 정세가 어떤 방향으로 진행이 될지 불투명하고 이와 같은 현 상황의 엄중함과 예측 불가능성을 감안할 때 범국가적인 차원에서 민, 관, 군이 함께 총체적으로 대비해 나가야 할 것입니다.
Now, the president also ordered her security chief to keep a close eye on any movement from Pyongyang, especially on the 5 South Korean islands in the West Sea closest to North Korea. Now, North Korea will mark the second anniversary of former leader Kim Jong-il's death on Tuesday, which is just a matter of days after current leader Kim Jong-un had his once powerful uncle Chang Song-taek executed. The memorial service for Kim Jong-il and planned visits to North Korea by foreign dignitaries this week should give us a glimpse at the regime's new power hierarchy. Well, for a closer look into what we could expect as Kim Jong-un enters his third year in power, our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee has prepared a special series on the changing dynamics in North Korea. Here's part 1 of her 3-part series.
Death of late North Korean ruler Kim Jong-il on December 17, 2011, his 27-year-old successor Kim Jong-un found his hands full. A nuclear arsenal, over 1 million troops, more than $6 trillion worth of natural resources, together with a heavily oppressed and impoverished population of 24 million, were all under the young Kim's reign. Making friends with an American NBA star and courting his fashionable wife in public, the young leader certainly distinguished himself from his father.
His father was more distant. He seems to be more like a natural politician who actually gets on well with people and mixes with them. He's photogenic like his grandfather was. And so that's what he's been deploying in his leadership style.
But the shuddering side of Kim Jong-un was revealed just days before his 2-year anniversary in power, with the young leader removing his own family member from North Korea's ruling elite.
Experts say the execution of his uncle Chang Song-taek, who was known as the second most powerful man in North Korea, signals that the young leader has entered a new phase in his leadership.
A second-in-command cannot exist in North Korea. Only one leader exists. In that sense, Kim Jong-un seems to have removed Chang Song-taek, the second man in power, to tighten his grip on power.
As shocking as the news of Chang's removal was to the outside world, experts say it was a calculated move and a much expected one. One by one, Kim had been dismissing senior officials from his father's generation and replacing them with his own inner circle. But Chang's execution may also destabilize the North Korean regime.
It shows how corrupted the North Korean leadership is and that there are many internal conflicts due to the forces who oppose change. In the long term, this may provoke the North Korean citizens.
In the foreseeable future, however, the young leader will continue portraying himself as a relaxed and open ruler, welcoming retired American basketball player Dennis Rodman for the third time this year, and allowing an international delegation to tour the Kaesong Industrial Complex this week. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
Now, a senior North Korean official says the execution of leader Kim Jong-un's uncle will not negatively affect the country's economic policies, and North Korea will push ahead with attracting foreign investment by developing new economic zones. ARIRANG News' Kim Jong-il tells us why.
Yoon Young-seok, a senior member of the State Economic Development Committee, told the Associated Press on Sunday that Pyongyang's trade goals remain the same despite Chang Song-taek's execution.
Even the Chang Song-taek's group caused great harm to our economy. There will be no change at all in the economic policy of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It's just the same as before.
Last month, North Korea announced plans to create special economic zones in each province to provide incentives for foreign tourism and investment. Yoon said Chang's removal would instead speed up progress on the economic front because he was a threat to national unity. He said Chang's execution should not scare away Chinese investment, which is crucial to the success of the zones.
Our State Economic Development Committee welcomes investment and business from any country to take part in the work of developing our new economic zones.
However, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said Sunday that Chang's execution is an ominous sign of the instability and danger that exists in North Korea. He said Kim Jong-un's decision to execute his uncle underscores the importance of a well-coordinated international effort to reduce nuclear threats from the country. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-hye, Chang Song-taek's wife and the aunt of Kim Jong-un, appears to have survived the purge and execution of her husband, as her name was included on a leadership list in the North state-run media over the weekend. Kim Jong-il, ARIRANG News.
Now, back here in this country, Korea has chosen Boeing and Command to manufacture GPS-guided bombs that can be installed on F-15K and KF-16 fighters. Seoul's Defense Acquisition Program Administration said Monday that it has selected Boeing to make guided wing kits and Command to make bomb fuses. GPS-guided bombs have a high degree of accuracy and are designed to fly directly to their targets no matter what the weather is like. Well, an official at the DAPA said GPS-guided bombs will help the Korean military counter attacks. Meanwhile, in the nation's political realm, amid the ongoing controversy over the state spy agency's alleged interference in domestic politics, a special parliamentary committee to reform the National Intelligence Service began discussions this week on how the relevant laws should be amended. But the ruling and opposition parties are still far apart on what the scope of reforms should be. ARIRANG News National Assembly correspondent Kim Hyun-ji reports.
On Monday, the National Assembly's Special Committee to Reform the Nation's Intelligence Agency invited a group of experts to share their views on how to make the agency more politically neutral. The National Intelligence Service stands accused of meddling in last year's presidential election by launching a smear campaign online to sway public opinion in favor of then-ruling party candidate and current president Park Geun-hye. The ruling Saenuri Party wants to limit the scope of the reforms, saying the agency did a good job of collecting information on the purge of Chang Song-taek in North Korea and alerting the South Korean government in advance.
Reform of the spy agency is necessary, but it's premature and wrong to argue that the meat of the reform should involve getting rid of the part of the agency that handles anti-communist intelligence.
The spy agency's anti-communist intelligence wing also handles domestic affairs, as NIS agents are authorized to collect and compile domestic public security information on suspected communists and attempts to overthrow the government. The current law also authorizes NIS agents to investigate crimes of insurrection or rebellion. Critics have argued that the agency's investigative authority in this realm is prone to abuse and easily manipulated for political surveillance. The main opposition Democratic Party wants to reduce the agency's authority over domestic affairs, saying that doing so would keep it away from local politics and allow it to focus on North Korea.
The Chang Sung-taek case has demonstrated that the spy agency really can play an important role for the nation if it does not waste its energy interfering in local politics and posting political comments online.
The public hearings will continue through Tuesday, after which lawmakers will start deliberating on how the National Intelligence Service law and a law on public officials should be revised to carry out the necessary reforms. Kim Jong-il, ARIRANG News.
Turning now to the railway strike that looks set to go the long haul. Striking rail workers say they will hold a massive protest rally in Seoul this week unless the government goes back on its plans to set up a new rail operator that they claim is the first step toward privatization. Well, the government and police says they will follow the letter of the law in dealing with what they say is an illegal strike. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Growing increasingly impatient with the rail strike, police plan to issue an arrest warrant for 10 union leaders on Monday after they failed to appear for questioning by officers. Once the warrants are issued, the 10 leaders will be taken into custody. In a separate incident, an 84-year-old woman was killed in southern Seoul on Sunday evening after her leg got stuck between the train doors while the subway was in operation. The person in charge of the subway doors at the time was a college student, just one of hundreds of substitutes that are filling in for well-trained regular workers, as the railway union strike extends into its 8th day. The incident is bound to stir up the already heated public reaction to the strike. The labor union of the railway operator says that, unless the government responds to its demands by Tuesday, thousands of people will hold a mass nationwide protest rally on Thursday.
If there's no response to our request by the 17th, we will conduct a legitimate nationwide protest starting on the 19th.
The strike is starting to impact other parts of the nation's rail system. Subway operations in Seoul will be cut by roughly 8% from Monday. Daily KTX services, which had been running normally last week, will be reduced by 12% starting from Tuesday. Freight trains are operating at just 30% of normal levels, and concerns are growing that supply shortages could become a reality for small and mid-sized companies in the near future. Nearly 8,000 workers are currently on strike, and despite Korail's threats to remove them from their positions, only 600 previously striking workers have returned to work. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
All of the day's important events. Events close to home, around the world.
The second half last, figure out what winners.
The arts and culture scene and the heart of global business.
Experts added that
ARIRANG News has your whole day covered.
the legislature will convene a plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring.
Now, Michelle Bachelet has again been elected president of Chile, giving her a second term in the nation's top office. The center leftist was elected by landslide on Sunday with over 62% of the vote against her conservative rival Evelyn Matthei, who came in with just 38%. Bachelet led Chile from 2006 to 2010 as the nation's first female president, and she was a popular leader with an approval rating of over 80% by the time her term ended. Now, she was not able to run for a second consecutive term, which is prohibited by the constitution in that country. Bachelet is being praised for having developed the country's democracy and for stabilizing economic growth. She has promised 50 reforms in her first 100 days after her inauguration in March. Meanwhile, Nelson Mandela has been buried in his hometown of Kunu following a state funeral service at which he was praised for teaching the world the lessons of forgiveness and reconciliation. Kim Jong-il reports.
Family, friends, and world leaders bid farewell to Nelson Mandela at a state funeral Sunday in his ancestral hometown of Kunu. The service took place in a huge tent at the family compound, where Mandela's portrait looked over his coffin draped in the South African flag and surrounded by 95 candles, each representing a year of his life. Guests sang and prayed as the service began.
For Tatu Nelson Mandela, for his faithfulness to your call, his example of justice, peace, and reconciliation, and his courage to endure suffering, rejection, and persecution for the sake of others.
We are deeply grateful to Madiba. We are deeply grateful that today we live in a lively democracy. We are deeply grateful that dignity has been restored to all South Africans.
During the service, a 21-gun salute was heard in the distance. Around 4,000 guests attended the ceremony, including leaders of African nations, Prince Charles, and American talk show host Oprah Winfrey. As the service came to a close, military pallbearers carried the coffin to the burial site for a private ceremony where about 450 guests paid their last tributes. Military jets and helicopters displayed South African flags as Mandela's casket was lowered into the ground. The burial concludes a 10-day period of commemorations following Mandela's death on December 5th. Mandela spent 27 years in prison, locked up for his fight for freedom against the apartheid system. Kim Jong-il, ARIRANG News.
Korea's top automaker says its market share in the BRIC nations of Brazil, Russia, India, and China is at a record high. Hyundai Motor and its affiliate Kia Motors said Monday that the company's combined sales in the BRIC nations reached 2.34 million units in the January to November period, a sales record in a stark contrast from the company's sluggish sales in the United States. The figure also represents the automaker's highest market share in the BRIC nations at 10.9%, and the automaker said it expects that to increase to more than 11% depending on December sales. A spokesperson from the auto group attributed the sales growth to the release of models tailored to foreign consumers. Well, LED lighting may appear to be a bit on the expensive side when installed, but it can save you energy and therefore money in the long run. With another electricity shortage feared this wintertime here in this country, a local association is promoting LED lighting as a way of the future. Son Jung-in tells us more.
This is a parking garage of an apartment complex in Gwangju, where the LED lights automatically turn on or become brighter when a person or a car nears the area. The management of the complex says it set them back nearly $48,000 to install the lights, but it's an investment they expect to get back.
We are now saving up to 72% or almost $4,600 from the average total electricity bill of $6,300 every month.
With the effectiveness of the eco-friendly lighting coming into light, the Korea Association for Photonics Industry Development, or KAPID, is actively pushing government agencies and the private sector to embrace the LED industry and turn Gwangju and other cities into LED cities.
For outdoor public spaces, the city of Gwangju is planning to replace more than 10% of the street lamps with LED lights within next year and continue the substitution extensively.
KAPID, which has a goal to achieve a 60% penetration rate of LED lighting by the year 2020, is also working on helping Korea's 800 LED-related companies make inroads into other markets in Europe and Southeast Asia. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
And taking a brief look at how the local stock market is doing at this hour, Seoul shares were a little changed in early trading on this Monday, with investors taking a wait-and-see stance before the Federal Open Market Committee meeting decides when the U.S. Federal Reserve will start scaling back its stimulus program. As of 1:30 p.m. Korea time, the benchmark Kospi was trading flat, in fact, at 1963, but still positioning near Friday's 3-month closing low level. The tech-heavy Kosdaq was also down by 0.7%, while on the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency was trading stronger against the greenback at a bit higher than 1,052 won. And now it's time for our first arts and culture segment of the week with our Lee Tae-ho. And today, Tae-ho takes a look at the musical theater industry here in Korea that is currently booming. And we will turn to Tae-ho. Good afternoon to you, Tae-ho.
Good afternoon.
So you'll be telling us about how the musical theater industry is looking here in this country today.
That's right, Conn-young. Now, this week, we start off the week with taking a look at who watches the most musicals here in Korea and where they are from.
December, The Three Musketeers, Man of La Mancha, Ghost, and Mamma Mia. These are the 5 hottest-selling musicals in Korea this holiday season, according to the online ticketing site PlayDB. And according to a recent New York Times article, musicals are booming. No, not on Broadway and not even off-Broadway, but right here in Seoul. Statistics on musical theater audiences from last year, provided by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, definitely back this up. The data also shows who is watching and where in the country musicals are most popular. Here in the Seoul metropolitan area, 16 residents in 100 said they saw a musical last year. Of the 16, 10 said they saw at least one musical, and about 6 people in 100 said they saw at least 2 or more musicals last year. Seoulites were followed very closely by people who live in the Chungcheong provinces as the people in Korea who watch the most musicals. In Chungcheongdo, 15 people in 100 say they saw a musical last year, with roughly 8 in 15 saying they saw at least one musical. But more Chungcheon residents than Seoulites saw 2 or more musicals last year, with roughly 7 of the 15 saying that they saw 2 or more productions during the year. Looking at the rest of the country, people in the southeast and southwestern part of the country saw the fewest musicals, with only about 4 in 100 having seen a musical last year. Looking at the demographics, it seems that more and more young people are seeing these productions, with roughly 14% of teens and 17% of 20 and 30-somethings saying they saw at least one musical in 2012. Now, more young people may be watching musicals, but that is not to say that middle-aged people aren't. 12% of people in their 40s and 8% of people in their 50s say that they saw at least one musical last year. And in 2012, more women saw musicals than men did, with roughly 14% of women and 9% of men saying that they saw at least one musical during the year. Now, all this bodes well for the roughly 300 theaters in Seoul, which happens to be the same number of theaters in New York. Seoul has more venues than any other city in Korea, which is perhaps one of the major reasons why Seoulites saw more musicals than people in other parts of the country. Another reason probably has something to do with the socioeconomic gap between people in Seoul and the rest of Korea. In any case, there's no doubt that musicals are gaining ground here, indicating that for all that Broadway has to offer Korea, Korea may just have something to give in return.
You know, Tae-ho, I definitely feel it. You know, around me, more people are watching musicals and going to different cultural performing arts, performances. But I didn't really know that, it differed by regions, such stark contrast between Seoul and the rest of the country. Is there a correlation between the number of venues where these musicals could be played and the number of visits to musicals by the residents there?
Well, I know for a fact that in Seoul here, there's about roughly 300 theaters for these stage productions, whether it's musicals or stage theater, which is more than any other city or region in the country. So it's definitely something that needs to be looked into further, and I'll be sure to keep everybody updated on this as well.
Yeah, and on top of that, if I may ask you to look into, we should also look at the number of productions or number of musicals being played in the rest of the region other than the nation's capital in this country to make sure that there is no polarization between between Seoul and the rest of the country in terms of the number of productions that are made available to the citizens there.
And that's definitely a good idea because the number of productions that are available to residents in that particular area or city may have to do with the large number or the difference in Seoulites and the rest of the country going to watch these musicals and arts and culture productions.
Right. Definitely something that we will revisit sometime in the near future. Thank you to her for that, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right.
And that's all from me at this hour. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you back here at 4 p.m. Korea time.